From the moment the sun rose over the sprawling McAllister estate, the day promised the usual rhythm of labor and obedience. The fields glistened with dew, and the air carried the mingled scents of damp earth and blooming magnolias. Children of both master and enslaved families ran their errands, carrying buckets, rakes, and messages from the house to the farthest reaches of the property. But amidst the routine, there were whispers, rumors that lingered like smoke through the slave quarters, carried by those who had eyes and ears sharper than the overseers ever suspected. And none was sharper than young Eliza McAllister, the master's only daughter, who had grown weary of the gilded prison of her own family's estate. She moved with the freedom her social station allowed, but her heart had found something or someone beyond the reach of privilege. His name was Daniel, and he was a field slave whose strength and gentle patience had drawn Eliza's attention from the moment she had first ventured beyond the house's polished floors and manicured gardens. Unlike the other men and boys she had seen, Daniel did not bow out of fear nor flatter out of obligation. There was a quiet dignity to his presence, and in his dark, steady eyes, she found solace, curiosity, and a dangerous longing. The summer air carried the scent of honeysuckle as Eliza slipped from the house that afternoon, ignoring the strict boundaries her father had established. She moved with deliberate care, weaving through the rows of cotton and corn, heart pounding with excitement and fear. Daniel had promised her he would be waiting near the old well at the edge of the eastern grove. It was a secluded place, where no overseer dared to wander, and where the whisper of the wind could mask the faintest sounds of a stolen conversation. As she neared the grove, she caught sight of him. Daniel knelt by the well, pulling weeds and tending to the small plot that served as his hidden garden, a secret sanctuary he had cultivated in defiance of the estate's rules. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world shrank to the space between them. Eliza's pulse quickened. She had to remind herself that her family's eyes were everywhere, that a single misstep could ruin everything, not only her freedom but Daniel's life. "Daniel," she whispered, stepping into the clearing. He looked up, a faint smile curving his lips. "Eliza," he replied softly, standing. The tilt of his head, the cautious yet confident way he regarded her, made her heart skip. The afternoon sun filtered through the thick branches, casting dappled light on the ground. They talked quietly, barely above a whisper, their hands brushing as they passed a small bundle of fresh herbs and bread between them. Each touch, each glance, carried a weight heavier than either could speak aloud. Hours passed unnoticed, and the grove seemed to breathe around them. Daniel's voice carried stories of small rebellions and secret triumphs within the fields, tales that made Eliza's pulse quicken with awe and fear alike. She laughed quietly, leaning closer, allowing herself the briefest moments of tenderness, of imagined freedom from the strictures of her family's control. But the world beyond the grove was never far. Footsteps, sudden and harsh, shattered the fragile bubble of secrecy. Eliza froze as she heard the unmistakable bark of her father's voice, furious and demanding. "Eliza!" The cry was both familiar and terrifying, a sound that turned her blood to ice. She looked up at Daniel, eyes wide with panic. Daniel's hands moved instinctively, shielding her, his body a protective wall. "Stay behind me," he whispered. Through the underbrush, he could see the tall, imposing figure of Mr. McAllister striding toward them, his face red with anger, his cane raised in warning. The overseers behind him moved quickly to block escape routes, their own fear of their master's wrath evident in the tension of their movements. "Eliza, step away from him," her father bellowed. The words struck like a whip across the clearing. Daniel did not step back. He stood firm, shoulders squared, gaze steady on the furious man approaching. "She is safe with me," he said calmly, his voice carrying a power that made even the overseers hesitate. The moment stretched. Eliza's heart raced, caught between terror and the strange thrill of defiance. Her father's steps faltered as he processed the audacity of the boy's words. Daniel, though a slave, did not cower. He did not flinch. And for the first time in years, Mr. McAllister felt uncertainty prick at his pride, a dangerous, unwelcome sensation. "Eliza, do you understand what you are doing? Do you realize the consequences?" her father demanded, voice quivering between rage and disbelief. Eliza's hands trembled, but her eyes were fixed on Daniel. "I do," she said, her voice firm despite the fear. "And I will not turn away from what I feel." End quote. The air hung thick with tension. Every sound, the rustle of leaves, the creak of branches, the soft thump of boots against earth, echoed the stakes of the moment. The grove held its breath, awaiting the outcome of a confrontation that would shift power, desire, and the fragile illusion of control forever. Daniel took a slow step forward, his gaze unwavering. "She belongs to no one," he said, and the simple statement carried a weight that even Mr. McAllister could not ignore. The father and daughter, the slave and the master, were locked in a silent war that no amount of wealth, social standing, or fear could untangle. That night, as the sun dipped low and shadows stretched across the fields, the course of their lives would be forever altered, and none could foresee the reckoning that would follow. The night fell heavy over the McAllister estate, dragging its dark velvet across the fields and house alike. Crickets chirped faintly from the edge of the grove, and the distant hoot of an owl punctuated the otherwise quiet night. But silence could not erase the tremor that had passed through the household hours before, when Mr. McAllister had discovered his daughter's defiance. Whispers moved like shadows along the halls, from maid to maid, overseer to overseer, all speculating on the audacity of a girl of privilege consorting with a field slave. Eliza remained in her chamber, heart still pounding, mind racing with the memory of Daniel's steady eyes and the unshakable calm of his stance before her father. She paced the length of the room, the candlelight flickering across the walls, shadows mimicking the turmoil inside her. The polished floor felt cold beneath her bare feet, but it did nothing to soothe the fire coursing through her. A soft knock at the door made her start. "Eliza, it's me," came a whispered voice. It was Daniel, standing just beyond the threshold of propriety and danger. She opened the window, climbing out onto the ledge as the warm night wind kissed her face. Daniel held out his hands, cautious yet steady, ready to guide her through the darkness. They moved silently toward the grove, keeping to shadows, avoiding the patrolling overseers and the watchful lanterns hung along the paths. As they reached the familiar clearing, the old well came into view, moonlight glinting off the water's surface. The grove seemed alive with anticipation, as if the very trees knew that what would unfold tonight was unlike anything the estate had seen. Daniel led her to a small circle of grass and leaves he had cleared earlier, a secret space they had claimed as their own. "Eliza," he said softly, "you should not have come out again. Your father." His words trailed off, the unspoken danger lingering between them. "I had to," she whispered. "I cannot stay trapped in that house, watching everything I care for crushed by fear. I cannot pretend I am only a daughter of privilege." Her hands shook as she brushed a stray lock of hair from her face. "I need you, Daniel." He reached for her, his hand firm yet gentle. "And I need you too. But you must understand the risk. If your father discovers us again, the punishment, it will be more than I could protect you from." "I will face it," she said, her voice unwavering. "I will face whatever comes, because I cannot face living without you." They stood close, hearts thundering in the silent grove. The night pressed in around them, but the space they shared felt like a sanctuary, a pocket outside the tyranny of the estate. For the first time, Eliza allowed herself to imagine a life beyond obedience, beyond rules imposed by bloodline and wealth. Daniel's gaze softened, though the tension in his body remained. "Then we must be cautious," he said. "Every word, every step, every moment we spend together must be hidden. One slip, and it could cost us everything." She nodded, understanding the gravity of his warning. "We will find a way. We have to." For hours, they whispered their fears and dreams beneath the moonlit canopy. Daniel spoke of secret paths through the estate, of places the overseers never patrolled, and of small acts of defiance he had managed to conceal from the master's gaze. Eliza shared her own longings, her desire for freedom, and her need to defy the strictures of her birth. The grove seemed to breathe with them, a silent witness to their plans and confessions. And as the hours passed, the bond between them strengthened, built not only on attraction but on the shared understanding of danger and desire. Suddenly, A distant shout broke through the serenity, a voice that carried unmistakably across the fields. Eliza's heart seized. "Father," she whispered, panic rising like ice in her veins. Daniel grabbed her hand, pulling her into the shadows near the edge of the grove. "Stay close to me," he hissed, scanning the darkness. "We move silently, or we do not move at all." Through the trees, they could see lanterns bobbing in the distance, overseers searching, calling, their voices a harsh intrusion on the quiet of the night. Every step they took had to be calculated, every branch, every rustle of leaves potentially exposing them. Eliza's pulse raced, not from the fear alone, but from the exhilarating closeness of Daniel's presence. The risk, the danger, and the thrill of rebellion coursed through her veins like wildfire. The night stretched endlessly, and yet every moment together was a victory. They whispered, planned, and clung to each other's hands, weaving the first fragile threads of a rebellion not against the estate, but against the very constraints of the lives they had been given. And in the silence that fell once the lanterns had passed, a quiet determination settled over them both. The path ahead was treacherous, the consequences unimaginable, but together, they had tasted the possibility of freedom, and neither would willingly surrender it. The grove held its breath as the first hints of dawn began to lighten the eastern sky. Eliza and Daniel parted reluctantly, each retreating to the shadows of their imposed roles, the daughter of privilege and the field slave, yet both carrying the knowledge that they had forged a bond neither wealth, power, nor fear could ever sever. The sun rose heavy and red over the McAllister plantation, staining the sky the color of warning. Eliza woke with the taste of fear still on her tongue, her mind replaying every whispered moment in the grove, every rustle of overseers' lanterns searching through the night. She had slipped back into the house moments before dawn, her hair tangled with leaves, the hem of her nightdress damp with dew. She barely had time to change before her bedroom door burst open. Her father stood in the doorway, boots muddy, eyes bloodshot. "Where were you last night?" he demanded. The words were low, dangerous, too calm. Eliza swallowed hard, steadying her voice. "I could not sleep. I needed fresh air." "You lie." He took 2 steps forward, each one measured. "And I do not tolerate lies in my house." For a moment, father and daughter locked eyes, the privilege and the chains of the plantation distilled into the space between them. Eliza stepped back, chin lifted. "Father, nothing you fear happened. I was only walking." Cold silence. Then, "You stay indoors today. No walks, no garden, certainly no groves." He turned sharply and left, but not before casting her a final look. Suspicion sharpened into certainty. She closed the door behind him, heart hammering. He knew, maybe not everything, but enough to be dangerous. Down in the fields, Daniel worked with an unnatural stillness. His hands cut through cane stalks with practiced rhythm, but his eyes flicked constantly to the house. He had seen men beaten, hunted, dragged behind horses, but never had he felt danger like this. News traveled fast among the enslaved. Before noon, 3 different field hands had whispered warnings. They saw the master search in the grove. "He ain't slept at all, been storming the ground since dawn. Daniel, watch yourself." Daniel didn't need the reminders. He could feel the tension in the air, heavy as summer humidity. He kept his expression calm, but every sense was alert, his body ready to move or fight or flee if needed. By midday, the overseer approached. "McAllister wants you at the stables," he barked. Daniel inhaled slowly, never showing fear, but inside, a cold ripple moved through him. When he arrived at the stables, Mr. McAllister was standing there with a whip coiled at his side, not drawn, not raised, but present, a threat disguised as coincidence. "Daniel," he said coolly, "you've been distracted." "I've noticed." Daniel bowed his head. "No, sir. Just workin'. Same as any day." "Is that so?" The master stepped closer. "Because someone was out near the grove last night. Someone who shouldn't have been." Daniel kept his breathing slow. "I don't go near the grove at night, sir." McAllister circled him like a predator testing its prey. "See that you don't." The warning was unmistakable. Daniel was dismissed without punishment, but the whip at the man's side had spoken louder than any strike. That evening, clouds rolled low across the sky. bringing an early darkness. Eliza waited until the house settled, until the footsteps faded and the candles burned low. Then she slipped out. She found Daniel near the edge of the grove, just as she hoped. His face was shadowed with concern. "Eliza, you can't be here." "He questioned me," she whispered. "He questioned you." "Daniel, he knows." Daniel took her hands not with the gentleness of last night, but with urgent resolve. "Then we end this. We stop meeting in the grove. We stop speaking alone. We stop everything." "No." Her grip tightened. "I won't let my father dictate my heart. This ain't about your father." His voice trembled. "This is about staying alive and keeping you safe." She stepped closer, the night wind lifting her hair. "Daniel, I will not abandon you to face this danger alone. We stand together, or not at all." His breath shook. He looked away, jaw tightening. "You don't understand the punishment he'd give you, and the one he'd give me." "I understand enough." She cupped his face. "I choose you." The words broke something inside him, something made of fear and longing and years of silence. He kissed her, desperate, a promise pressed into the darkness. But the moment shattered with a sound that froze their blood. A twig snapped. A lantern flickered to life. A voice, cold, triumphant, cut through the trees. "Well now," said Mr. McAllister. "Ain't this a sight?" Eliza's mouth fell open. Daniel's hands dropped. The master stepped out of the shadows, 2 overseers at his back, each holding a rope and a cudgel. "My daughter," McAllister said quietly, "and my property." His eyes gleamed with a fury so deep it looked calm. He pointed at Daniel. "Seize him!" Eliza screamed. The grove, their sanctuary, became a trap in an instant, and nothing would ever be the same again. The McAllister house had never been silent. Not truly. It was a place of footsteps, servants moving, doors opening and closing, the creak of floorboards beneath hurried boots, the muffled commands of overseers, the clatter of dishes, the sound of work and fear. But on the night of the dinner gathering, the night Daniel was forced to serve in the main hall, the house grew quiet. Too quiet. Mr. McAllister had ordered it himself. There would be no distractions, he said. No noise, no unnecessary movement. Every servant, slave, and worker felt the tension settle heavy across the estate, like thick smoke. Something was brewing, something sharp and dangerous. Daniel felt it as soon as he stepped into the front hall with the wine tray balanced in his hands. The air was wrong, heavy, charged. Mr. McAllister's eyes followed him like a predator following prey. Eliza felt it too. She stood beside her mother at the long dining table, her face calm, her hair pinned in delicate curls, her pale gown glowing in the candlelight. But her fingers trembled around her silver fork. Her gaze kept sliding toward the doorway, where Daniel moved quietly between guests. He didn't need to look at her to know she was watching. He felt her, the way a heartbeat senses another. The guests, wealthy planters, hunters, businessmen, could not sense the violence brewing underneath the polished table and the fancy dishes. They laughed loudly, bragged about profits, horses, crops. But beneath the noise, Eliza kept glancing at her father, studying the strange stillness in his posture. Usually he laughed, drank, bragged along with them. Tonight he was silent, too still. Eliza's stomach tightened. Daniel approached the head of the table with the wine decanter. He steadied his breath. He had served hundreds of dinners before, but this time he felt exposed, as if every guest could feel the secret between him and Eliza. Mr. McAllister watched him pour the wine. Then he smiled, a cold, thin, unnatural smile. "Boy," he said sharply. Daniel froze. The entire table turned silent. Forks paused in midair. The room held its breath. "Yes, sir," Daniel said softly. "Come closer." Daniel stepped forward. "Closer." Daniel obeyed. Eliza's hand curled into a fist beneath the table. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. Mr. McAllister tilted back in his chair. "Do you know what happens," he said slowly, "to a slave who forgets his place?" Daniel met his gaze steadily. "No, sir." "Oh, I think you do." The guests exchanged confused looks. Eliza felt her pulse thrumming in her throat. "Father," she said cautiously, "this is neither the time nor—" "You be silent," he snapped. Her mother gasped softly. The guests glanced uncomfortably at each other. Mr. McAllister rose from his seat, his chair scraping the floor. His face had darkened. "I've seen you sneaking off," he hissed. "Leaving your cabin at night. Wandering too close to the house. I know your kind. Always restless. Always hungry for something you shouldn't touch." Daniel's jaw tensed. "And last night," the master continued, voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "I found tracks near the grove." Silence. Absolute silence. Eliza's breath caught in her throat. Not tracks. Footprints. Hers and Daniel's. "Tracks?" one of the guests asked lightly. "What kind?" "Human," Mr. McAllister growled. "And not mine." Guests stiffened. Overseers in the hallway shifted. Daniel's grip on the tray tightened. "Sir," he said quietly, but the master cut him off. "I know what you've been doing. I know who you've been meeting." He turned, slowly, deliberately, toward Eliza. Every guest followed his gaze, her face drained of color. "Father, please. Stand up." Eliza froze. "Stand. Up." Her mother grabbed her hand, whispering, "Just do as he says, child." Daniel's heart pounded so loudly he could barely hear anything else. Eliza rose slowly, eyes locked on Daniel's. Fear, apology, love, all tangled together. Mr. McAllister pointed at her like a judge condemning a criminal. "You," he said, voice shaking with fury, "have been sneaking around behind my back. With him." Gasps echoed around the table. Daniel's blood ran cold. Eliza choked back a sob. "Father, please, it isn't what you think. Don't make me a fool in front of my guests," her father roared. Daniel stepped forward instinctively. "Sir, if you allow me to speak." Silence. "You speak when spoken to." For a moment, Daniel saw it, the rage, the humiliation, the intention. The master wasn't just angry. He was planning something. Eliza's voice broke. "I love him." The room exploded. Her mother cried out, collapsing back into her chair. A guest choked on his wine. Several stood up abruptly. The overseers rushed toward the doorway. Mr. McAllister looked like a man struck by lightning. Then, the lightning became fire. Daniel dropped the tray just as the master lunged across the table, knocking dishes and candles to the floor. A crash of shattering glass rang out as Daniel dodged his grip. "Get him!" the master screamed. "Get that bastard out of my sight!" Eliza screamed Daniel's name. Overseers rushed forward. Daniel turned and ran. Mr. McAllister bellowed behind him, and the house, the silent, waiting house, exploded into chaos. The next morning came heavy and gray, the kind of sky that looked more like a warning than a weather pattern. Elias rose before dawn as usual, slipping out of the shed with the careful quiet of a man who had spent years learning how not to be heard. But he carried something new inside him, something lighter, warmer, terrifying. Something named Anna. She had kissed him last night, and he'd kissed her back. He replayed it through the morning, cutting hay, hauling water, mending fence posts. Every task blurred beneath the memory of her breath on his lips, her fingers trembling against his jaw, the way she whispered his name like it was a secret spell someone had passed down to her in confidence. But with the sweetness came fear, sharp, constant. Her father was not a man who forgave anything, least of all disobedience, least of all affection, least of all a daughter's independent heart. As Elias hammered a loose board on the east fence, he heard the crunch of boots, not the usual lazy, heavy walk of overseers. These steps were quick, clipped, angry, the kind of footsteps that belonged to someone who had discovered something and was already drowning in fury. Elias turned. Anna's father, Master Heron, strode across the field, face red, jaw clenched so tight it looked carved from stone, and clutched in one angry fist was a piece of white linen cloth. Anna's handkerchief. Elias's blood froze. Had he dropped it? Had she? How had Heron found it? "Boy," Heron growled, his voice low and poisonous. "We need to talk." Elias stood tall but still, every muscle locked. "Yes, sir," he said. Heron lifted the handkerchief and shook it once, violently, as if the tiny piece of cloth had personally insulted him. "You know this?" Heron snarled. Elias said nothing. He didn't dare. The wind had died. The birds had fallen silent. Even the grass felt like it leaned away from the man's rage. Heron stepped closer. "I found this hidden under some boards in the loft of the old barn," he said. "You wouldn't know who might have been sneaking around up there, would you?" The barn loft, where Anna had slipped away to read, where she sometimes hid from her father, where she had met Elias 3 nights earlier just to talk. He swallowed, working to keep his face blank. "No, sir." Heron's nostrils flared. "You sure about that?" "Yes, sir." A long pause followed. Heron's eyes scanned Elias's face with the hungry suspicion of a man who wanted to catch someone, who needed to confirm what he already feared. But before he could press further, another voice called out from across the pasture. "Master Heron." It was Caleb, the old stable hand. "Sheriff's here, says it's urgent." Heron turned sharply, and for the first time in 10 minutes, Elias breathed. Heron jabbed the handkerchief against Elias's chest. "This ain't finished, don't you forget that." Then he marched away, leaving Elias alone with his trembling heartbeat. And the deviating versified this, "And we friended to motion first." That night, fear and desire warred inside him. Should he seek Anna out? Should he warn her what her father found? Should he disappear into the woods before Heron decided to search harder? As darkness fell, a soft tapping came at the shed door, 3 taps, then 2. Her signal. He opened the door, and Anna slipped inside like a breath of warm wind. Her hair was loose, her cheeks flushed from running, and her eyes were wide with worry. "Elias," she whispered. "He knows." His chest tightened. "You didn't tell him anything?" "Of course not. But he found my handkerchief. I think he suspects someone. He asked me questions at dinner, kept watching me, insisted I stay in the house. I had to pretend I was going to bed just to get out here." Her voice shook. She wasn't the calm, bold girl from the orchard tonight. She looked younger, more fragile, her fear finally catching up to her. Elias stepped closer. "You shouldn't be here. And leave you alone with him angry?" She breathed. Never. He didn't want this. He didn't want her risking everything for him. But when she reached up and touched his chest, the world around them softened again. "I don't care what he suspects," Anna whispered. "I love you." The words struck him harder than any whip. He grabbed her shoulders gently, trying to steady them both. "Anna, he'll kill me." "Then we leave," she said. "Tonight. We go north. There are people who help. I heard stories, safe houses, hidden paths, riders who carry messages. Elias, we can escape. Together." He stared at her. The idea was impossible. Beautiful. Lethal. "Anna, you don't understand. If he catches us," she pressed her forehead against his, "then we don't get caught." Outside, a dog barked in the distance. The farmhouse door slammed. Heron's voice boomed across the yard, calling for lanterns, calling for men. He was searching, and he was coming closer. Anna grabbed Elias's hand. "We have to run." And for the first time in his life, Elias didn't hesitate. He didn't bow. He didn't fear his place. He didn't shrink. He chose her. Together, they slipped into the dark, just as Master Heron's lantern light swept across the empty shed doorway behind them. The storm broke over the plantation just after sundown, a hard, slashing rain that turned the yards into rivers and the trees into shivering silhouettes. In Claire's room, the shutters rattled. The candlelight flickered, and Elias paced like a caged animal, every muscle taut with fear. They had spent the entire day waiting for word, waiting for boots on the stairs, waiting for the moment when Mr. Whitford's rage would come crashing through the door. But hours passed, and nothing happened. No summons, no shouting, no footsteps, nothing. Silence was worse. Claire sat on the edge of the bed, her hands clasped so tightly the knuckles were white. "He knows," she whispered. "He saw us. He knows Elias. And he's planning something." Elias stopped pacing. "If he knew for certain, he would have dragged me out by now. That doesn't mean we're safe." Lightning flashed, illuminating her fear-stricken face. Elias crossed to her and gently touched her cheek. "Claire, we run tonight." Her breath caught. She shook her head. "Elias, it's suicide. The roads are being watched. Papa ordered every overseer to take a torch and patrol the woods. He never does that unless..." Unless somebody he hates needs catching, Elias finished. Another crack of thunder made Claire flinch. Elias took her hands. If we stay, he'll kill me. Maybe kill you too. You know what he's capable of. Claire blinked back tears. Where will we go? South, Elias said immediately, like he'd been planning this in his mind for years. There's a swamp past the river, and a handful of Maroons live deep inside it. Rebels, runaways, fighters. I've traded food with one of their scouts before. They'll take us. Claire stared at him as though seeing him anew not just as the man she loved, but as someone forged from steel and determination. You were planning this, she whispered. Not until now, Elias answered. But I won't let him hurt you. And I won't let him own my life. When the candle finally sputtered low, Claire rose to blow it out but froze. Footsteps, heavy ones, slow, deliberate, climbing the stairs. Elias's hand went to her mouth before she could gasp. His other hand reached for the poker by the fireplace. The footsteps grew louder, closer, stopping just outside Claire's door. The breath in the room vanished. Claire felt her heart slamming against her ribs. Elias tightened his grip on the poker. The thunder outside masked nothing now. All they could hear was the weight of a man standing inches away. Mr. Whitford. A shadow shifted under the door. Then 2 knuckles rapped once. Claire. His voice was too calm, too quiet. Claire froze, her throat locked. Open the door, darling. Elias shook his head slowly. Don't. Another knock, sharper, impatient. Claire. Open it. Claire tried to speak, but no sound escaped. Elias positioned himself to the side of the door, muscles coiled. Silence again. Then footsteps receded down the hallway. Claire nearly collapsed, but Elias caught her. He's not gone, he whispered. He's waiting. They both stood motionless for a long minute before Claire finally whispered, He's testing me, seeing if I'll obey. And if I don't. Her voice broke. We leave now, Elias said. She didn't argue. Claire grabbed her cloak, a small satchel, and a pair of boots. Elias lifted the loose floorboard where she had been hiding coins saved from years of secret embroidery commissions, the money her father never knew about. The storm outside made it easier. Thunder would cover their steps. Rain would erase their tracks. Before leaving, Claire paused by the window. In the distance, she saw lanterns moving 3 overseers patrolling the tree line. We won't make it, she breathed. Yes, Elias murmured, tightening his grip on her hand. We will. He led her down the servants' back stairwell, avoiding every creaky step he had memorized during years of cleaning. Claire's breath shook with every bolt of lightning. Elias took the lead, guiding her out the side door into the storm. The rain hit them like thrown gravel. The wind swallowed their footsteps. The world was dark except for the lanterns. Too many lanterns. They ducked behind a wagon as 2 overseers trudged past, soaked and irritated. Master says we patrol all night, one grumbled. Says the girl's acting strange. She's always been strange. Rich folk daughters usually are. Still, the first muttered. He's convinced she's hiding something. When the men finally moved on, Elias pulled Claire toward the tree line. They sprinted through tall grass, their boots sinking into mud. Claire stumbled, but Elias lifted her like she weighed nothing. Rain soaked their hair, their clothes, their hopes, but they kept running. At the edge of the woods, Elias paused, chest heaving. Claire turned back once, just once, and saw the glow of lanterns swarming the yard like fireflies. He knows, she whispered. We're ahead of him, Elias said, and we keep going no matter what. Thunder rolled across the sky like a warning. The woods loomed dark and endless before them. Hand in hand, they plunged into it. The storm swallowed their silhouettes, and the night sealed behind them like a closing mouth. They didn't look back again. The plantation never truly slept, but that night it felt like the whole earth was holding its breath. The wind had died. The crickets fell silent. Even the hounds, usually restless in their kennels, whimpered as if sensing something monstrous moving toward them. Thomas Lancaster's rage had been simmering for weeks, but now it had reached a boil so violent it scorched everyone around him. He ate little, slept less, and prowled the property with a lantern and a rifle tucked beneath his arm. His men followed behind him armed, hungry for violence, and desperate to avoid their master's wrath. Eliza watched him from behind the workshop wall, her breath shallow. She had never seen a man unravel this completely. His hair hung uncombed, his boots caked with days-old mud, his eyes red and glossy like a feverish animal. Even the overseers whispered among themselves, "He's losing his mind." Beside, Eliza crouched Samuel, his hand trembling against his thigh. "There ain't but one way this ends," he whispered. Eliza didn't look at him. "And what way is that?" "With blood. His or mine." She closed her eyes, only for a moment. She knew he wasn't exaggerating. Thomas had sworn that he'd drag Samuel through the dirt behind a horse till his skin peeled off, and she believed him. She believed every horrifying promise that came out of that man's mouth. "You could still run," she said softly, "before he finds you. And leave you?" Samuel shook his head. "I'd rather die standing next to you than run alone." She opened her mouth to protest, but footsteps cut her off. Heavy, steady, getting closer. Samuel pushed Eliza behind a stack of lumber and crouched low. Thomas came into view, lantern swaying, rifle glinting. 2 overseers trailed behind him. "We searched the whole damned yard," Thomas snarled. "I smell a rat, the kind that thinks he can hide in my own shadow." He paused, sniffing the air like a hound. "Samuel thinks he's clever," he growled. "But clever men bleed the same." Samuel's jaw tightened. Eliza gripped the back of his shirt, trying to hold him in place because she felt the anger pulsing off him like heat. The search party moved on. The lantern glow faded. Samuel slowly exhaled. "He's close, Eliza. Too close. This ends tonight." She pushed in front of him, grabbing his face in both hands. "Don't you dare. Don't you fight him alone." He looked at her with a softness torn from somewhere deep and ancient. "I ain't afraid of Thomas Lancaster, but I am," she whispered. "Not for me. For you." He pressed his forehead to hers. Then a scream tore through the air, a woman's scream. Both of them jerked up. "That's Clara," Samuel said. "The master's daughter." Eliza's chest tightened. Clara was supposed to be in the manor, safe behind locked doors and guarded hallways. If she was screaming outside, they sprinted toward the sound, weaving through the work sheds and across the moonlit yard. They found her near the stables, pinned against a post by one of the drunken overseers. Her dress was torn at the sleeve, her face streaked with tears. "Get off her!" Samuel roared. The overseer turned and froze. Samuel launched at him like a storm. He grabbed the man by the collar, slammed him against the post, and drove a fist into his jaw so hard that bone cracked. Clara crumpled to the ground, sobbing. But before Samuel could pull away, a muzzle pressed against the back of his skull. "Thomas." Eliza's heart plummeted. Thomas's voice was almost serene. Too serene. "Stand real still, boy." Samuel froze, chest heaving. "You touch my overseer." Thomas murmured. "You touch me. And you touch my daughter." His hand trembled on the trigger. "Please," Clara gasped, crawling to her feet. "Father Samuel saved me." Thomas didn't even glance at her. "Saved?" he hissed. "He brought shame. Everything wrong in this house started with him." He cocked the hammer. Eliza stepped forward without thinking. "Thomas," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "You're not listening. Your daughter is telling you the truth." "Silence," he barked. "I should have cut your tongue out weeks ago." Clara stepped between her father and Samuel, arms wide. "If you kill him," she cried, "you'll kill the only person who showed me kindness in this wretched place." Thomas's hand shook harder. His face twisted anger, heartbreak, humiliation all tangled together. "Move, Clara," he warned. "No." The night held its breath again. Samuel could feel the cold metal against his skin. Eliza could see the madness behind Thomas's eyes. And Clara, fragile, trembling, was the only shield between life and death. Finally, Thomas lowered the rifle, but not out of mercy, out of calculation. His smile was chilling. "If the boy wants to live," he said softly, "then tomorrow he marries off this foolishness with his back." He looked at Samuel. "I'll whip you until every bone in you learns its place." Clara choked on a sob. Eliza felt her blood run cold. Thomas turned away, satisfied. "Dawn," he called. "Prepare him. Samuel met Eliza's eyes. There was no fear, only resolve. "This ends tonight," he whispered again. But this time Eliza understood. He meant it, and he meant to survive it. They say the land remembers. The way footsteps sink deeper where sorrow lived. The way trees lean toward places where secrets once burned. The way a single name can outlive the voices that whispered it. For decades after the night Caleb and Lily ran, the Briar Hall plantation stood strangely silent. The fields still grew, the seasons still shifted, but something had been broken, some spell that held the land in cruelty. Overseers came and went, none staying long, all muttering the same thing. "Something's wrong with this place." Some claimed they heard a woman crying in the magnolia grove. Some swore they heard a man's whisper, steady, calm, protective. Others said the main house felt colder than any place should in a Georgia summer. But there were also stories of hope scattered in the ruins. A quilt found in the old slave quarters, stitched with a lily on one corner and a tiny C on the other. A tree near the creek carved with 2 initials intertwined. A row of cane that grew taller than the rest because someone once rested there, daring to dream of a future free. Rumors spread farther still, about a light-skinned woman in Savannah who ran a boarding house and kept a magnolia blossom drying in a book, about a tall man who worked the docks, reading newspapers aloud to workers who had never heard their rights spoken before, about a child with eyes sharp like her father's and a smile sweet like her mother's, who grew up hearing only one piece of advice again and again: never bow your head to anyone who calls themselves master. No one ever proved the rumors, but they never faded either. And when the war finally came, when chains began to break across the South, Caleb's name surfaced again in a way that made former masters grit their teeth. Some said he guided fleeing families through swamps no hound could track. Some said he burned down 2 plantations himself. Others said he never harmed a soul unless they laid hands on someone who could not fight back. But Lily, she lived quieter, not hidden, just peaceful, teaching letters, organizing baskets of donated bread, folding clothes for men who had never owned anything clean in their lives. And every night she placed a magnolia on the windowsill, facing the road, waiting, not because Caleb was gone, but because a person in love still waits, even when the one they love is resting beside them. Their story became a quiet legend whispered among freed families, the girl who loved a slave, and the slave who didn't break, even when the world tried to break him. Some say the world changed because of men with armies. Some say it changed because of leaders with speeches. But others, older, wiser, said it changed because of moments like theirs. A girl who refused to look away, a man who refused to kneel, and a love that refused to die in the dark. And though Briar Hall fell to ash years later in a strange midnight fire no one ever solved, one thing survived, something found in the ruins, kept safe by the last remaining magnolia tree. 2 silver rings, melted together by heat, fused into a single unbroken circle. A symbol, a promise, a quiet truth etched into time. Love, once chosen freely, is a force no master ever controlled. And 2 souls who choose each other in a world built to keep them apart leave marks deeper than chains ever could. For weeks after Elias vanished into the swamplands with Rosa's heart stitched to his, the plantation moved like a body missing half its bones. Work was done. Yes, fields still needed tending, animals still needed feeding, but the usual rhythm of the land broke, replaced by a hush that lingered like fog. No one mentioned Rosa's disappearance. Not openly, not where ears might twist truth into punishment. But every worker carried the weight of it in their shoulders. Clara, however, carried it in her chest. She had not slept more than an hour a night since that stormy evening when her father tried to drag Rosa away, and Elias stood between them like a man willing to burn the world down just to keep a promise. She forced herself to smile in the mornings, to say the right things at the right times, to play the role expected of her. But her facade cracked each night when the house fell still. On one such night, while the lamps flickered low and the cicadas hummed beyond the windows, Clara sat on the floor of her room, holding the handkerchief Elias had once tied around Rosa's wrist, now hers. She traced the frayed seams as if touching the edges of a memory that refused to fade. He's still out there, she told herself. She's still out there. The thought was equal parts hope and agony. Downstairs, Her father drank more than usual. The heavy steps, the muttered curses, the clatter of bottles, Clara had begun recognizing them, as well as she recognized her own heartbeat. She heard none of the remorse she once hoped he'd find. Only bitterness. Only the need to destroy someone for what he felt was stolen from him. And tonight, that bitterness erupted. A scream tore through the night, not Clara's father, but one of the house servants. Clara bolted upright, her hand pressed to her mouth. Another scream followed, then shouts, then boots slamming wood. She threw open her door. Smoke drifted through the hallway. Not fire. Something else, something burning, something thick and strange. At the bottom of the stairs, her father writhed on the ground, clutching his throat as though invisible hands were closing around it. His face was red, then purple, sweat gleaming like oil. Two servants hovered helplessly, one too afraid to get close, the other praying under her breath. Clara rushed down. What happened? What happened to him? One of the servants pointed to a wooden box lying open on the floor, small, carved, unfamiliar. Inside were sprigs of dried herbs, charred black. Whatever had been in it had been set ablaze moments earlier. He opened it, the servant whispered. It was left on the porch, no name, no mark. Clara stared at the box. Her heart lurched. This was no accident, no illness, no punishment from God. This was a warning. Before she could reach her father, the front door slammed open so hard the hinges screamed. The room froze. The servants dropped to their knees. And there, framed in the doorway by moonlight, mud, and shadow, stood Elias. Alive, broader than before. Scarred. Clothes torn from travel. Eyes burning with something that wasn't anger but wasn't softness, either something carved from grief and steel. But he wasn't alone. Behind him stepped Rosa, her hair shorn unevenly from when her braids had been grabbed the night she fled, her arms covered in fresh scratches and older bruises. But her posture, tall, unbroken, made her look like a blade forged in fire. Clara's breath stopped. Her father tried to stand, but his legs buckled. He gasped, clawing at the air, still choking on whatever curse, smoke, or ash had gripped his lungs. Elias didn't move toward him. He didn't need to. The mere sight of him made the master's face twist with terror. "You came back," he rasped, barely able to form the words. "After all I did, after all I—" Rosa stepped forward, her voice cold enough to freeze the room. "You did not think the past would stay buried, did you?" Her father's eyes widened. Clara didn't speak. She couldn't. She was watching a reckoning unfold. The master collapsed fully, his fingers digging into the floorboards, trying to drag himself backward. But his strength failed. His breath rattled. Elias approached Clara instead. "Are you hurt?" he asked softly. She shook her head, though she felt herself trembling. "You came back," she whispered. "Yes," he replied, "but not for him." His gaze lifted toward the choking man on the ground. Rosa lifted the small, burned box. "He inhaled every bit of the poison he meant for Elias," she said, her voice steady and merciless. "Delivered in the same wood he once used to lock me in the smokehouse." Clara staggered back, realizing the truth. Her father had sent men into the swamps with traps for Elias, with poison, with fire. And now, the consequences stood before him. Elias didn't touch the master, didn't raise a hand. He simply watched. Clara closed her eyes, and when she opened them, the man who had ruled her life lay still silent, unmoving, defeated by the cruelty he once dealt freely. No one in the room mourned. Elias bent down beside Clara, never touching her until she nodded permission, not assumption. He took her hand gently. Rosa stepped closer. "We came back for her," she said to Elias. "And for you," Clara whispered back. For a long moment, the three stood together in the moonlit doorway, the air quiet except for the last dying rasp from the man who had brought all this upon himself. Justice messy, imperfect, brutal had taken shape at last, and the night, long suffocated by fear, finally exhaled.